Right then, you join us today at Moorland Tarn Fishery on Bankpool for a spot of early season meat fishing. You might think I'm going a bit mad saying we had a frost this morning and out comes a high protein meat, but as the daffodils just start to shoot up, meat can be an absolutely fantastic bait to catch anything from skimmers, bream, F1s and carp. They all love that high protein bait after a long winter of sitting dormant on the bottom. Switching to meat earlier than like everyone else can be the go-to for bolstering your catches. So it's not shoving loads of quantity of meat down the throat. A tin will be plenty of meat for a session, but just switching to that meat early on in the season can be really beneficial to your catch rate. So hopefully we're going to put that into practice today. Early springtime, there's no better bait when the fish are coming out of winter and haven't really ate any protein than the good old faithful luncheon meat. Used to be plum rose, it's now changed to Royal Dane, but it's the same stuff as far as I'm aware. Quantities wise, we only need a tin really. Gone are the days of feeding loads and loads of meat in summertime. So we are really early springtime, and to accompany the luncheon meat we've also got some fishery micros, about a pint or so there, and then just to change of hook bait we've got some expanders. So meat is a brilliant bait for, say, when we're coming out of winter time, when those fish are looking for some early proteins after sitting there dormant throughout the winter months. Big skimmers, F1s and carp all love to chomp on some meat. So preparation wise, we'll grab our bait box. We've got our luncheon meat that we've already peeled out of the can with a little windy key. We'll just discard this to one side so it's not blown in the lake. And then into the 6mm tilly meat cutter. It's just quite a tight fit on there. And then we're going to grab Mr. Plunger. Just forcing it over the top. I better do that on the gabion basket as opposed to through the riddle. Bit of pressure on there. Gently. And we're nicely compressed through. And then second process, just going to turn the plunger around, mounts on the side of the bait box, and again just a nice bit of gentle pressure. A little bit more stuck on there. There we go, help that through. And just rough that up through our hands, and we've got about a pint of luncheon meat. Here at Moorlands the limit's 2 tins anyway, but if I feed a pint of luncheon meat today I'm going to have like 300 pounds, so plenty of meat there for 5 hours that we'll be fishing today. Straight out the tin, I don't like how fatty it is, so what we're going to do, I'd normally do this at home, but we're just going to do it on the bank. We've got some boiling water and we're just going to scald the meat to release some of that fat. So some boiling water that we've got from home there. We'll just give it a few seconds and it will go like a milky colour, and it's just the fat drawing out of the meat. The meat's going to fall through the water at a uniform rate as opposed to having bits hold up in the water column. And you can see at the minute there's just a few pieces of meat floating there. So we've give that say 30 seconds, and then we're just going to put that over across 2mm riddle, and then we're just going to tip that. Here's my big bucket, so we're not going to waste any meat, just over the top there, like so. And then we're just going to place that back into the bait box so we're not having any wastage. And as easy as that, we have our nicely prepared meat. And with these tilly meat cutters, it's worth mentioning, there's no need to do like a 7mm meat and a 6mm meat, because you get some nice odd sizes. So like a standout hook bait. With some of the other meat cutters, it's very uniformed and you'd end up having to do a 6mm meat and say a 7mm meat. But with the tilly ones, you get some odds and sods in there, which I like for just like a little standout hook bait as opposed to having to punch or cut different sizes. and we'll either be feeding a few cubes of meat or some micros or a little bit of both. I've set up a line for fishing out my hand at like top kitten 3 and then a longer line at 15 metres. So let's run through rigs, starting with my long line. I say it's a bit blustery out there and we're fishing in about 5 foot of water. So let's start with a float. Let's bring him onto shot. So we've got a 0.5 carbon slim pattern there. It's about 5 foot deep and it is blustering a bit, so I want it to be nice and stable when we're fishing. So we've got about 18 inches of line from DAC run down to float, and then 2 number 10 stots 6 inches from the float itself as well, just so I can control it in that gusty wind. Moving down to shotting pattern. So it's a big float, so we're fishing nice and positive. So 12 inches from the hook, I've got my bulk of 6 number 8 ballerbinas. And then on the hook length knot, which is 6 inches, I've got a positive number 8 dropper there. And we'll just bring him into shot as well, hopefully you can pick him up. So if I do have any skimmers lifting it up, I can see it nice and easy on that positive dropper. Well, that's the theory anyway. Moving on to the hook length material, I've got 012 with an MX C1 in a size 16. So finessey enough to catch these skimmers, but also if we're going to be catching some great big carp, we're going to have no issues with getting blown up. And that's match 2, if I bring elastic into play. Just that nice forgiving red slick, which is a 10 to 12 in a long kit. So anything from a skimmer to an F1 to a carp, and we're going to be able to get them in hopefully. And that's just geared up with a medium flexi on my long rig, and I can just sprinkle in some 6mm and some micros just to make some noise. So that is long rig out the way. So float wise for fishing on my short line is a 0.25 carbon slim pattern. So this is perfect for fishing through the water, where I'm going to be chucking 2s and 3s, 6mm, and then fishing my rig in a similar manner to hopefully catch them through the water. And if not, it's stable enough in these choppy conditions to catch them whilst we're fishing on the bottom. So exactly the same main line as before, the 018, and elastic choice wise. But moving on to the shotting pattern, it's totally different to what my positive rig was, or my deep water rig, or my long rig. We've got 6 number 10 ballerbini shot, and they're strung out every 4 inches from the hook length knot up to the final third of the rig, so we can just fish it through the water. Exactly the same hook length material, 012 and an XC1 in a size 16 and a 6-inch hook length. And then the only difference with that, we've got a small flexi pot where I'm just going to be putting 2s and 3s in there of 6mm. And then I can just tap that over the top where I've been throwing by hand just to tighten everything up. Right then, we just jumped on our short line, went in on the light rig, and it was just towing through a little bit too much, so I've just dropped onto my bigger rig just because of the wind and the tow, and we've got a lovely Mr. Skimmer. That was just on one of those bigger pieces of meat, and I can just control it with that bigger rig that little bit better because the wind's getting up. So hook bait wise, as I say, I'm trying to pick out one of those like odd shaped 6mm. I call him a 6.5mm, it's like a long gun, just that bit of a standout. 2 pieces of meat in the pot, and then I'm going to just top that up, just thumbing a few micros in. I say just playing between putting neat meat in and a few micros as well, just depending how they want it. So if there's a few more skimmers, they seem to want those pellets today. So we've got that bigger rig with that longer length of line. I'm going to ship him out to our marker, turn our pot over, that little flexi, and just clump those in. And then this is going to be anchored in place and not going to move in that wind or tow. So we'll just wait for everything to straighten up. And as it's all nice and straight below the float, lower that last 6 inches or so into place. And then I'm just gauging where my back shot is, so just off the water surface. Got plenty of tip showing. There's a lift bite there. And we've got just a little bit of slime on the line, so that's important just to remove that. That might have been me with the fat off the meat, or that might have just been what that liner was, so just really important just to get rid of any slime or fat off the hook length knot, and then I'm going to place that back in. But as I say, with that great big positive dropper, you could see when there's a lift bite and one of those skimmers holding it up. So we'll wait for it all to straighten up, and then we'll lower him down the hole, and then just lowering it down so that back shot's just off the water. So we've got plenty of bristle showing, just in that chop and that wind. Indication there again, and then a little lift. There's definitely some fish in my peg, which is good to see. There we go, in again. Another skimmer, I think. That nice slick doing its work. And then we'll slide the net under Mr. Skimmer again. Oh, there we go. He's a bream, Mr. Bream. A lovely fish. I reckon he's as old as me. Smashing. Hold him up for the camera and hook him. Nicely hooked in the bottom lip. Lovely Mr. Breams. There we go. In again. Another skimmer, not a massive one, but still a weight builder. As I say, in these fish, you think, oh, maggots might be better, but with maggots, coming into springtime, you can get me played with tiny little roach, perch and skimmers and all sorts. And say, skimmers absolutely love meat, as well as those carp and F1, so it's not limited to what we're going to catch. So that was another quick bite there. And he's well hooked in the side of his chops, and then we just place him to the net, and then it's repeating the process. So we're going to pick out another 6.5 mil piece of meat, that long one, roll him on the hook, don't look at the sun because it's blinding me, and then let's go big this time. Let's go for 3 pieces of 6 mil meat, and then a few micros on top of that, just clumping it over the top. So elastic wise, you can see it's hanging out the tip of my pole, and people will say, oh look, that looks really nasty. But what I don't want to happen is for me to bump one of those skimmers or the bream in my peg and spook them all. So I'd rather just give it a little yoink on the bottom of my long kit, and I know when I'm going to hook one, it's going to come out enough to not disrupt or bump one off me line. Nice and still on the bottom there, just clinging onto those couple of number 10 back shot, and I can keep it all nice and tight. That was a really quick bite then. Nice and tight with that little flexi pot. So that slip just doing its work. Onto the top kit. Then we've got that nice long landing net pole. Get me words out eventually. And we'll just wait for him to come up. There he is, Mr. Skimmer. Lovely fish. Slide him into the net. And then it's easy to build a bit of a weight when they rock up on that short line. So we've left it till the last couple of hours to the session. Haven't put any bait in to start with, just left it alone. We've about 2 hours left of the session. We've been positive, we've put in probably 50 cubes of meat in and a few pellets, and just left it 20 minutes whilst we were still fishing on the long line. Dropped on it and had a skimmer straight away, so they've definitely come into that feeding zone. Especially early season, I don't think there's any point in feeding it from the start, because you could blow your peg or overfeed them, because they're not really going to be there the early part of the session. What like there might be, just missed a bite there, another lift bite, like there might be in summertime. So this is early spring. So just leaving it, and then potting it in. And they'll settle over it so much better than, say, potting it from the start and potentially blowing your peg. So you can just fish meat on its own, just neat, just tapping a few pieces of 6mm meat. But micros always seems a good accompaniment to the meat. So everything likes eating micro pellets, and it's a nice, non-offensive way of feeding your peg. And it all just depends on the day. Sometimes I want neat meat, sometimes I want some pellets fed, sometimes it's a case of just feeding pellets and having your standout meat hook bait. But today it's been feeding just a few cubes of meat and a few micros on top, just to keep them mooching about in a peg. So after having them quick run of 5 or so skimmers and bream and stuff, my peg went a little bit quiet, so I just topped up with, say, like 50 pieces of meat again. I had another look on my long line, no bites on my long line, and I've dropped back in, and we've got what I think is an F1. So they are definitely, now we're later on in the session, responding to a bit of feed. You see an F1? Oh, it's a little ghost carp. Nice fish. So there's a nice early spring little ghost carp. The snaffled me 6.5mm meat. So it's been quite apparent today that topping up regularly with a volume of bait has been the way to go, because there are some bream in my peg, some skimmers, and they're coming in mopping everything up. You'll catch 2 or 3 really quick fish and then no bites. That flicking like 2s and 3s of meat can be really good when you're fishing like on the drop for carp and F1s, but as I say, today it's been really apparent that we're going to top up with quite a volume of bait. So in the pot with meat, 6mm meat, and then we're going to do the same with micros, same sort of volume, and then I'm just going to stir them all together. I'm going to put that into our short line, or onto our short line. And I say, even though we've upped our feed, we're still not going to feed anywhere near a tin of meat. And then I'm going to go straight over the top of that now with that bigger rig that we were using for fishing long into the lake, because the wind on the toe is quite nasty. Going to flick it in, hold on to it for dear life, wait for everything to straighten up, and then just lower him down, and then just clinging onto that back shot, and hopefully they'll come straight back over that 6mm meat and micro dinner party. And just watching for a nice lift bite or a little dink under. There we go. So we put all that meat in, and we've gone straight over the top of it, and we're straight back into a bream. So they're definitely on it today. Whereas early on in that session, or today's session, sorry, we couldn't buy a bite. It's like there was no fish in the lake. And by just being patient and leaving that short line alone, it can be a bit of a bottle job, and you can catch lovely skimmers and bream like so. So typical spring weather. 1 minute the sun's absolutely blinding as we can't see the float. The next minute it's pouring it down with rain and blowing an absolute gale. So making some adjustments to where we're fishing and rigs that we're fishing has been really important to try and keep in contact with the fish, and we've dropped on that short line with that nice fairy rig, and it's just pulling through my peg. That toe's making it really awkward. So I've got my bigger rig for fishing out into the lake. I put an inch of line on the bottom, so we're nice and static with that piece of meat. So it's anchored in place. I'm not going to have any issues with it pulling through and looking all unnatural, which is really important to adapt to the conditions, I say, which is like typical spring weather of going from freezing cold rain to bright sunshine. So hopefully we can carry on putting these skimmers and these bream in the net, and if we're lucky, some of the bigger resident carp. Oh, there we go. I think he might be right on the bow. That might be a carp. Yeah, that definitely isn't a skimmer. We've called for him and he's on the other end of the string. That was perfect timing, Mr. Carp. Thank you very much. And I can see mainly sun in my eyes, but I'm not moaning. It's nice to have the sun out after some horrendous weather of late. Oh, it's a nice chunky F1. Look at that for a meat-loving F1. Doesn't look like a very old fish, but he's certainly likes chomping on the meat. So we've hooked into something a little bit more substantial now. Mr. Wobbly Carp on the end. Because it went quiet for a couple of minutes with no real indications of my peg, so I topped it up again, and then we've gone straight back in, and this carp's just, I think he's just come in and hoovered up everything in front of him. Just taking our time with him. And we've got that long landing net pole, which I think is really crucial when you're fishing with long kits. So if he pops up at range, we can scoop him. But at the minute, he's wanting to come right under our feet. So it's definitely a proper one. There are some colossal fish here at Moorlands. There we go. A lovely net shuffling. Moorlands Farm. Oh, nice chunky fish. Look at that for a lovely meat chomping Moorlands carp. With that nice balanced tackle, still got a bit of fight in him. We've managed to take our time and get him in the net.